Hello and welcome to our brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we're going to focus on the efforts of Egypt on the political and the humanitarian fronts to be alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian citizens in the Gaza Strip and ways of strengthening the Palestinian cause and question in the next few months. And even will be shedding more light on the efforts of Egypt to be helping Lebanon in terms of the conflict going on between Hezbollah in the south and Israel as well. We'll be shedding more light on the latest developments that took place for today with my dear guest for tonight in the studio, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and the member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. But we'll be starting straight away with the main top stories for today that took place throughout Sunday as President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received the President of the African Development Bank, the AFDB Group, Sidi Wald al-Tah. President al-Sisi affirmed Egypt's full support for the AFDB President's leadership, especially in light of the current economic and the geopolitical challenges that impact the developmental efforts in the African countries. The meeting tackled enhancing cooperation between Egypt and the bank. President al-Sisi also stressed the support for the bank's role in addressing the economic challenges in Africa and promoting development. The meeting reviewed the Egyptian economic reforms, infrastructure projects in the African continent, and the cross-border projects that contribute to strengthening the regional integration and achieving high standards of development. Both sides also discussed the upcoming African Business Forum due in Al Ain City in June of 2026 and agreed on continuing enhancing the strategic cooperation. And still with the activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who had received on Sunday Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli. The presidential spokesman Mohammed al-Shinawi said that the meeting discussed a number of political, economic, educational and social files. Attracting investments, increasing exports and localizing industries within the 2030 Egypt vision also topped the agenda of the meeting. Al-Shinawi said that during the meeting, President al-Sisi stressed the necessity of covering the state's needs of the strategic goods for the sufficient periods of time in light of the regional and the international developments. He stressed the need to continue with the efforts to decrease inflation and increasing expenditure in the sectors of health, education and social security. He reiterated the need to control the market prices and reassured the provision of the food commodities. The meeting also reviewed the preparations to inaugurate the new Senghor University campus in Borg Al Arab City in Alexandria, which is to take place this month. The spokesman said that the project reflects the depth of cooperation between Egypt and the international partners and contributes to boosting development and capacity building in Africa. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi offered heartfelt condolences to the Egyptian people and those who appreciate the authentic art over the passing away of the iconic singer and composer Hani Shaker. Via the social media account, the president paid tribute to the late singer, who promoted singing with the sweetest of the artistic innovations in all the national, social and humanitarian occasions. President al-Sisi prayed to God to bless Shaker's soul and bestow patience and solace upon his family and acquaintances. The Rafah border crossing received on Sunday a new group of Palestinians returning to the Gaza Strip. The Red Crescent is facilitating the measures for the return of the Gazans, constituting the 40th group of returnees with the concerned bodies. Meanwhile, the Egyptian authorities prepared for receiving a new group of injured and sick Palestinians from the Strip to receive treatment in the Egyptian hospitals. In a related development, the 187th humanitarian aid convoy from Egypt started entering a subgate of the Rafah land port in the direction of Karm Abu Salim. The convoy carries tons of food and relief aid, medicines and fuel. And the final top story for the daily debate for tonight is that the Israeli military issued new evacuation warnings in southern Lebanon for the villages beyond the area it occupies, despite the truce with Lebanon intended to halt the fighting with Hezbollah. Lebanon state-run national news agency later reported a series of Israeli strikes across southern Lebanon, including on towns not mentioned in the evacuation warning. On Wednesday, the Israeli military chief of staff Eyal Zamir had threatened to strike Hezbollah beyond the yellow line, which marks the area of the Israeli control. Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the latest developments in Lebanon, of course, they have taken place after the ceasefire or during the time of negotiation of the ceasefire between the United States and Israel and Iran to be stopping the war raging in the Middle East. How do you see the latest developments in terms of violating this ceasefire in the south of Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah?
Well, unfortunately, there is nothing new here. I mean, Israel has always threatened and actually taken the liberty of striking even after a ceasefire. I mean, I think that the latest reports, we are talking about an average of between 7 to 10 martyrs every night in Gaza Strip after the peace accord were signed in Sharm el-Sheikh. I mean,
yes.
we are talking about 1,000 already, almost 1,000 since the signature of the agreement that was actually signed by President Trump himself. So actually what we are talking about here, whether we are talking about Lebanon, whether we are talking about Palestine, it is the same procedure. Israel do not respect any signing of any accord, starting from the Oslo Accord that is pronounced dead already, until the latest peace accord signed in Sharm el-Sheikh. Israel only benefits from this unconditional support from the United States and continue to strikes wherever it wants. You mentioned also Lebanon right now, and it has even threatened, as you mentioned in your report, to strike even beyond the yellow line, which is already decided that this is the line of southern Lebanon, not to mention the amount of territory it has already annexed to Israel. And then we are going to negotiate once again how do we get the safe return of these territories, not to mention the 1 million Lebanese who have migrated due to the escalation of the Israeli activity in southern Lebanon. So what we are seeing here is the continuation of the policy of impunity that Israel is actually enjoying due to the support of the United States, and especially with the reign of President Trump. And I think that even now, after the divergence in position between the United States and its traditional allies in Western Europe,
yes,
I think even those players who were quite influential before to pressure Israel a little bit, their influence or their impact is diminishing actually, simply because Israel is seeing that it doesn't need anyone except the United States, so it doesn't really care about the position of the European countries as it used to do. And unfortunately, what we are seeing right now is that the situation is becoming more and more gloomy. We don't know exactly where are we going to stop, since Israel has already liberated itself from any rule of engagement, from any respect to the international law or even the international humanitarian law. So when it comes to what do we think about what's going on, I think it is not positive at all due to what we are seeing right before our eyes.
How do you see the future of the Iranian arms in the region, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example, like the Houthis in Yemen, especially that it is becoming an alibi for Israel to be attacking those countries, and more specifically the south of Lebanon, and quite possibly intervening politically and militarily in the south of Lebanon?
Well, if we remember the agreement that were spoken about between Lebanon and Israel, and that there will be direct negotiations. And I think this already started with the both ambassadors at the United States, the Lebanese and the Israeli ambassador to the United States, and how to try to discuss the future of the relations. I think there was something very important in those accords. What we heard or what we read is that Israel has the right even to strike if it sees or it gets there is an intention to carry out any operation against its territory. So actually now we have moved to something unprecedented in the international law, that Israel has the right to strike if it feels that there is an intention, not actually a real threat, just an intention, which means that Israel has the right always to keep on striking southern Lebanon, and even, as we have seen, all the way to Beirut. So this is the first point. As what comes to the arms of Hezbollah, of Iran, which is Hezbollah, for instance, I think that Israel is benefiting from the weak presence of Hezbollah more than the Lebanese right now. I mean, after the strike of the pager battle, as they call it, and removing many of the top leaders of Hezbollah, and after the many strikes on southern Lebanon and on the strong household of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So Hezbollah is becoming like a lion without serious teeth. And thus its presence, just even morally, can actually be considered as a threat to Israel, and accordingly keep on bombarding and striking over Lebanon. And what's more dangerous, annexing more territory. I think that so far we hear that around 20% of the Lebanese territory is occupied by Israel. When are they going to leave? If they are going to leave at all, this is something remains to be seen.
You think those arms for Iran in the Middle East, in the region, like Hezbollah, like the Houthis, they represent a sticking point in terms of the negotiation between the American president and Iran?
Yes, but they do not constitute a strong point from the Iranian point of view, because actually their presence is more vital to Israel than it is to the Lebanese people. Simply because as long as there is something called Hezbollah, which will always be there, Israel can take this, as you mentioned, as an alibi to continue pressuring Lebanon and to seizing more land to secure northern Israel. And this is the problem, that as Israel have done the same with Syria, and now it doesn't want to give back what is Syrian already. The idea in southern Lebanon is no more the Sheba farms. It's becoming a lot beyond that. I mean, we are talking all the way to the Litani River and maybe beyond. This is the serious problem with Israel. That's why we've seen, and we've said it several times on this platform and other platforms, that Israel has always insisted on not defining where its borders are, and simply because it's an expandable country and it's a colonialist power, so it wants to continue to annex more land and more territory before it will sign any agreement on where its borders are. It keeps saying that it does not need those lands, simply it wants them to secure its northern border, but the reality is not that, and we have right in front of us what happened in Syria. And it has occupied a huge amount of territories all the way to Jabal al-Sheikh, and it doesn't seem that there is any possibility of returning these lands, at least in the near future. So the situation is quite dangerous, because actually the arms of Iran, as you ask about, are becoming more profitable to Israel than it is to Iran. Iran has its own problem right now, because let's be honest, I mean, Iran has received substantial strikes from the United States.
Yes.
I mean, militarily speaking, Iran has lost a lot, but politically, Iran is still fighting its battle to try to get with a good face, let's say, in front of the international community. But militarily speaking, of course, the United States and Israel have hit it very hard, and they believe that because we don't know the exact situation there, so we don't know how badly the situation is. But of course, the regime regime is still in control. The powers who are supposed to be in power, although we don't know who is exactly in power over whom, because we hear whether we are talking about Mr. Mohammed Bakr on one side, or we are talking about the military and paramilitary forces in Iran, who is exactly in charge. But at the end of the day, we have a regime that is still in control. We have a population that is suffering, and we are not talking about a teeny country or a small country. We are talking about a country that is exceeding 90 million persons. So the situation is quite dangerous for Iran to give really serious intention about its military arms, whether we are talking about the Houthi or about Hezbollah or other powers in the region.
Yes, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, allow me to be going to the first report of the daily debate for tonight, focusing on the Palestinian cause and the efforts of Egypt to be supporting Palestine, and more specifically the Gaza Strip, on the diplomatic and the humanitarian fronts.
Egypt is maintaining a central role in Gaza crisis by combining large-scale humanitarian aid delivery with intense diplomatic, security and strategic mediation, aiming to stabilize its border, alleviate Palestinian suffering and prevent displacement. As of early 2026, Egypt is recognized as the primary conduit for aid and a key broker in the second phase of a ceasefire deal. Egypt has spearheaded the humanitarian efforts, providing over 70% of all aid to Gaza since October 2023. As of last April 2026, Egypt has sent over 186 aid convoys, delivering roughly 900,000 tons of aid. In a statement, the ARC said the shipment included more than 2,210 tons of food parcels and flour, over 545 tons of medicines and medical and relief supplies, and about 1,265 tons of fuel to operate hospitals and essential facilities in Gaza. It also included 11,024 clothing items, 3,768 blankets. The convoy is part of Egypt's ongoing efforts to maintain humanitarian support to Gaza, with the RC serving as the national body coordinating aid deliveries. At Rafah crossing, the ARC continued to provide humanitarian services, helping the movement of wounded and sick Palestinians and their companions. It also distributes hot meals, clothing, personal care items, and return kits for people heading back to Gaza. The organization has maintained a continuous presence at the border since the start of the war. The Rafah crossing on the Egyptian side has remained open, and over 900,000 tons of aid have been delivered through a network supported by over 65,000 volunteers. The Egyptian Red Crescent operates with over 65,000 volunteers coordinating food, medical supplies, fuel and tents through the Rafah and Karam Shalom crossings. Meanwhile, Egypt has provided medical treatment to thousands of injured Palestinians, receiving multiple batches of patients through the Rafah crossing. Regarding the diplomatic front, Egypt acts as key mediator alongside the US and Qatar, leveraging its security and intelligence channels to mediate for ceasefire in Gaza and comprehensive peace deal, aiming for the full implementation of the post-war Phase 2 plan. Cairo has proposed a comprehensive plan for rebuilding Gaza, and as of late 2025 has sent engineering teams to clear debris and prepare for reconstruction. Egypt has advocated for an interim Palestinian technocratic administration for Gaza, focusing on reunifying Palestinian governance. As of early 2026, Egypt continues to host a and facilitate negotiations between Palestinian factions and international partners navigating ongoing challenges regarding crossing operations and ceasefire compliance. The Egyptian stance on the Palestinian question has always been a central and constant feature of Egyptian foreign policy. It is based on the premise that a just solution to the Palestinian question is a necessary, insurmountable condition for the achievement of peace and stability in the region, and that the way to achieve this is through the decisions of the international law and the implementation of the fundamental right of the Palestinian people to the establishment of an independent state with its borders in terms of June 1967 and its capital in East Jerusalem.
Welcome back. You're still watching the daily debate, and to be focusing on the Palestinian cause and the efforts of Egypt to be alleviating the suffering on the Palestinian shoulders in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere in Palestine. I'm honored once again to be saying hello to my dear guest in the studio for tonight, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Today we have seen some developments in terms of returning the returnees from Egypt into the Gaza Strip once again after receiving treatment in the Egyptian hospitals in the past period. How do you see the efforts of Egypt on the medical and the health fronts for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip?
Well, Egypt from the beginning did not spare any effort to alleviate the burden on the Palestinian. We have seen Egypt opening its borders to the Palestinian, receiving the wounded and the injured civilians who could not be treated in Gaza to be treated in Egyptian hospitals. We even built some field hospitals to treat the Palestinian if they couldn't reach any medical facility in Egypt itself. And on another side also we've seen what we have done concerning the entering of the aid. But here I need to say something.
Yes.
We have to understand that the conviction of Israel is to make life as impossible as it could be for the Palestinians in order to liquidate the Palestinian cause and to get rid of the Palestinian. I mean, we don't need any international media or any world coverage to know this fact that we have seen for decades in Israel. I mean, even the Prime Minister of Israel himself, he said that he is proud to be the one who totally abolished the idea of the two-state solution. So if we start from this base, which is that Israel wants to get rid of Palestinians to make life as miserable as possible to the Palestinians, then we will understand all what it's doing in order to harden their life. First of all, that now the Rafah border cannot actually receive any trucks, and that the only entrance is through Karm Abu Salim,
yes,
which is more complicated. Second, that Israel has and will always keep to it in its hand the right to investigate every truck and each truck, and this could mean days and nights of waiting period until they finish their inspection. So actually they are the one holding the tab. When they want to open, they open. When they don't want, they don't want to open it. And the dual usage of some things, like for example concrete or anything that could be used not just in construction but for other purposes that
yes,
Israel would ban. Also for fuel, although fuel is very important to make the left of the hospitals work, but also there are restrictions. And in short, short. They are trying to make it as difficult as possible so that Palestinian would voluntarily migrate from Gaza and go to start a life anywhere else. And this is the real problem here, that although all the efforts of Egypt and the international community, but Israel remained the only power who is capable of allowing or not allowing the humanitarian aid to enter to Gaza. And in this regard, I think that the United States specifically have to exert more pressure on Israel so that more humanitarian aid can enter, because this is the Geneva Convention. These are the international law regulations, the international humanitarian law, that the civilians should not be subject to collective punishment as what Israel is doing, which is a war crime. So the idea is here is who is capable of putting pressure on Israel so it would allow the Egyptian and also the other countries who wants to help be able to help. You remember at a certain phase the only possible way is they were by air, which actually killed many Palestinians while they were waiting to receive those things, and some of them fell on the tents where they're living and killed people and so on, because simply Israel didn't want to open its borders for any humanitarian aid in order to once again harden the situation in Israel. So this is the main problem, is how are we going to convince Israel to really open its border, the borders of Palestine that it is controlling, in order to allow the humanitarian aid to flow without any obstruction.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the importance of not displacing the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip or from any other place from Palestine for that matter. And we have seen the stance of Egypt to be rejecting the displacement of the Palestinians and the migration, as you mentioned, that they are pushing the Palestinians out of Palestine and out of the Gaza Strip into Egypt, into Jordan, according to the previous statements released by the American President Donald Trump. But how did you see the other statements released by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be rejecting this idea, to be rejecting this plan and this strategy implemented by Israel for the past few decades, for example, not just for the past few years? On the other hand, the 187th aid convoy, the Zaid al-Izza from Egypt to Gaza, entered today from Egypt into the Gaza Strip.
Well, as when it comes to the convoys that are entering, these convoys, although of course we salute the efforts behind them and we salute President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for insisting on continuing, although the turmoil that is going on all over the Middle East,
yes,
that he still remembers the Palestinian and still wants to help as much as he can to alleviate the hardship that the Palestinians are living in. But in the reality is that, as we said before, that the Israelis are holding the tab, as we can say. They are the one who can open and they can close. I mean, of course, we are talking about the 187th Zaid al-Izza convoy,
yes,
but I believe that we could do thousands of these convoys if Israel did not put all these obstacles and all these restraining conditions against the entering of the convoys. This is on one hand. The second thing is that the Israelis are controlling now, occupying actually now over almost 60% of Gaza Strip.
Yes.
And this, I think, Israel considers it as the bonus they took after the massacres and the deliberate war against the civilians in Gaza Strip. That's why everybody is calling it a genocidal war, because it was a genocide against the Palestinian people, and they ended up by occupying 60% of the Palestinian land. And as we all heard before, Israel is not thinking at all about applying the second phase. And if you remember on this platform, between you and me in the same studio, we mentioned before that Israel's only concern is to retrieve its hostages and the bodies of its hostages. And the minute it's going to receive them, they will not care about implementing any additional phase of a peace process. And this is exactly what we are seeing right now. Israel, after it has received all the bodies, until the last body, we all remember how was the last body.
Yes.
I mean, the price of this body costed us over a few hundreds of Palestinian martyrs. Nevertheless, after Israel recuperated the last of their hostages and the bodies, they don't want to go into phase 2, because this phase 2 actually implies that Israel has to withdraw from the Palestinian territory, which they are not planning to do, and to even ease even more the entrance of humanitarian aid, which, as we have seen, Israel is not doing easily. So this has become a weapon, a tool for Israel to control the poor Palestinian population and the civilians who are suffering, and especially the children and the elderly who are suffering from the lack of many basic needs. While if you look into many reports coming even from international organizations, that Israel is allowing the commercial merchandise to enter Gaza a lot more than the humanitarian aid, simply because these belongs to people who are going to pay customs for it and who are going to sell it and not to give it away. And this is what Israel wants. I mean, is to keep the pressure on the Palestinian people more than they could sustain, simply for maybe another explosion of this population, and then Israel will doom them once again as terrorists and then resume its activities and strikes against the Palestinian population. So we are in a vicious circle, and Egypt is trying to do its best to alleviate the pain from the Palestinian, but of course the support of the United States is much greater to allow Israel to continue with the massacres it's committing against the Palestinian people.
Speaking about the political leadership of Egypt, we have seen His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi visiting Cyprus for the past couple of weeks and meeting with several European leaders, and more specifically the Cypriot leader Nikos Christodoulidis, during participating in the informal European Union summit. And he spoke about the importance of the Palestinian cause, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, the implementation of the second phase of the plan according to the strategy and the proposal of the US President Donald Trump. How do you see the importance of President al-Sisi always speaking about the Palestinian cause? Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati doing the same within every opportunity that he can.
Well, simply because we are seeing things the way they are. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi knows that the root cause of all the problem of the Middle East is the Palestinian cause. If we didn't have the Israeli occupation of Palestine, we wouldn't need any resistant movement in Gaza or in the West Bank, if there are any, and we wouldn't need Hezbollah in Lebanon, we wouldn't need any hostility against Israel, we wouldn't need, actually, if I may add, the split of the Arab world between those who are following the Abraham Accords,
yes,
and those who are opposing it in the Arab world. We've seen, I mean, it's not a secret that the Arab world is not on the same posture anymore when it comes to the Palestinian cause, and when it comes to even the common Arab issues. And this is becoming very alarming now, that for the first time we see right before our eyes there is a split in the Arab unity that were always held before. So the situation is quite clear that Egypt is trying its utmost. President al-Sisi understands that the root cause of all the problems is the Palestinian cause, and the minute we are going to reach a real peace between Israel and the Palestinians, we can have normal relations with Israel. And I want to say that since 2000, and we have what we call the Arab Initiative, that was originally a Saudi initiative, that has become the Arab Initiative, which is Land for Peace, in short. And Israel, as you know, have always, even if it didn't say it out loud, but have always believed in peace for peace instead of land for peace. which means that I will give you peace, you give me peace, but I will still occupy your land. This is what Israel wants, and this is what Israel is doing actually by expanding its territories into other neighboring countries like Syria, like Lebanon, like Palestine, that as we just mentioned, they added already 60% of Gaza, and they passed a law to even annex more and more of Palestinian land in the West Bank, and to expand the colonies, and to totally destroy the hope for a two-state solution. And I'm afraid to say that sometimes they succeed. I mean, what we are asking for, and the whole world is asking for, which is the land of the 4th of June 1967,
yes,
I think is different from the land of the partition decision in 1948. So Israel actually is pushing to always new frontiers, so that we will start negotiating on the last step and not on the original step. We should be negotiating on the 1948 borders, but actually we are negotiating about the 1967 borders, and we are not even able to achieve this. And all of this because the strongest power in the world, the strongest military power in the world, which is the United States, is unconditionally supporting Israel for whatever it's doing, especially at the time of President Trump, who has been the president who has done a lot of things to Israel no other president dared before to do. And unfortunately, this is how we reach where we are right now.
Yes, Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and the member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi witnessed the presentation of the Comprehensive Development Plan for Al Galaila city for the next 4 years within the framework of planning for the city's operation. The President also followed up on the executive status of projects currently being implemented in Al Galaila city. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi conducted a phone call with President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. During the call, President el-Sisi praised the notable progress witnessed in bilateral ties between Egypt and Kenya, affirming the importance of continuing to strengthen these ties across various areas of mutual interest. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received Mr. Nikolai Patrushev, aide to the President of the Russian Federation and Chairman of the Russian Maritime Council. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi led the funeral procession of Major General Kamel Madbouli, father of the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, at El Mushir Tantawi Mosque in New Cairo. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi conducted an inspection tour of the construction works for Al Ahram Station project in Giza Governorate as part of the first phase of Metro Line 4. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received a phone call from Sanai Takaichi, the Prime Minister of Japan. The call began with President el-Sisi congratulating her on the major victory achieved by the Liberal Democratic Party under her leadership in the general elections held in February of 2026. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received Mr. Mitsu Ochi, President of Hiroshima University in Japan. At the outset of the meeting, President el-Sisi expressed Egypt's pride in the distinguished bilateral relations between Egypt and Japan, as well as the extended partnership between the two countries in the fields of basic and university education. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi participated in the Labor Day celebration held at the headquarters of the National Egyptian Company for Railway Industries in the Suez Canal Economic Zone east of Port Said.